Good evening and welcome to a three-part series that is going to be hosted based on a documentary called Childhood 2.0. My name is Jenny Yannick. I am a school counselor and a licensed professional counselor and a crisis response team leader to help schools in troubled times when traumatic events happen here at ESC Region 12 in Waco, Texas. And I was very intrigued upon viewing this documentary, so much that I really wanted to try to facilitate a discussion and have some more open dialogue about ways that we can help our children as they're growing up in an age where they can't help but be surrounded by technology. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it means that our careful efforts together can help them do so safely and responsibly. So I put together a very brief handful of slides to help us as we go through a conversation. And at times, for those of you who are joining me during the event right now, I'll ask a few questions and you're welcome to participate or respond through our chat option whenever I ask maybe your thoughts on some things. But first, I want us to just be kind of introduced to Childhood 2.0 in a very brief video segment and something that will kind of allude to what's to come.
Now than I am.
Kids are so intuitive with like the mobile devices.
They can pick up any mobile device and just, it's so intuitive, they know exactly what to do with it.
Just pick it up and just be like, okay, there you go. And you're just like, what did you do?
I've seen kids run circles around parents.
At least now I have in-house tech help when I need it.
You know, technology moves quickly. It's like the Wild West.
I try to keep up with the latest.
By the time I'm aware of what it is, they've gone on to the next one. How do you keep up? It's something new every day.
It's exhausting. You can't just like, okay, I gotta vet all this and vet all this.
I am not currently on any social media. The use of phones has just ramped up.
I wouldn't even know how to navigate.
Everything is going crazy. It's very difficult to opt out.
It's already too late. The train has already left the station way before I realized, and I'll never catch up.
Do I feel like I can protect my kids from the dangers online? No.
They're gonna have to navigate it and make decisions for themselves without me sooner than I want.
Its pace has been so fast that some of the, we'll call them guardrails that are necessary to keep an industry accountable have been set aside in the spirit of innovation.
Right now, we're effectively living in an experiment. How is this going to affect us? We'll find out with the current generation.
I will tell you that I'm probably going to be dead and gone, and I'll probably be thankful for it when all this comes to fruition. Because I think that this scares me to death.
That's a very powerful introduction, and it brings us to the place where we think about what was taking place in this very first segment, the very first 30 minutes. This is an hour and a half long, this Childhood 2.0 documentary, and a lot was going on inside this first segment. I know it was very intriguing to me how they started, and for some of us, we started kind of in the middle, right where this segment picked up, but if you went back even further and started at the very, very beginning of it, there were some things and images that came about to just kind of take us back. So what we're going to be exploring tonight together in this very first, really quick in terms of, you know, how much training it could take to go through an entirety of a digital citizenship training. We're going to explore this first segment and really contemplate the rise of technology, especially relative to how it was when we grew up. No matter who you are right now, if you're on as a parent or you're on as a teacher or you're on as an educator or just an adult who's interested in this, the way we grew up is different than what our kids are experiencing. So we're going to kind of talk about that. We're going to have a conversation within our chat is how we're going to probably be able to use this with healthy connections and technology use and things to really try to keep in mind whenever we are working with students and children who are using technology and using technology daily now. We're going to talk about some possible solutions and consider how we might introduce technology to our kids and how to help them achieve balance, because there were pieces in this first segment, the very first 30 minutes or so, that alluded to some big things on the horizon for what kids are dealing with that could be technology related. So think back in this segment when it very first started, how we saw a couple that were talking about their, growing up experiences or their concerns, and then the iPad kind of went off and they went, well, that's probably our kids who are texting or communicating with us. And we also saw Doris Gosnell, who is a special education teacher, and she talked about how she got her first phone when she was in college. So the generations before us were introduced to any type of technology way later in their lives than what we were, and maybe and of course what our children and generations behind them were. So we're trying to think about what was life like before that information revolution, and what kind of things were brought about, and how did we go about our daily lives, and how do we even survive without technology? Most young kids would probably ask that question because they can't even connect or understand what our lives were like without the cell phone. There were images that came about for being outside. They alluded to how many times and how much time we all spent playing outside. Maybe you have fond memories yourself of how many times you would go outside and you would just play until it was time to come home. And the way that you knew it was time to come home is that you had the street lights, and everyone in the documentary said, oh, when the street lights came on, that's when we went home. It was very much more carefree, and there were things that we just had pickup games of ball in the yard. And the funny part about that is if we talk about that, because it's so hard for kids to understand, they become really intrigued with it many times. And sometimes they'll kind of give us a hard time about it. They'll kind of say that just seems so ancient. But at the same time, they're intrigued too, because they've never experienced life the way that we did. And they couldn't conceive of a rotary or a dial-up phone. And there's a handful of folks right now who are on, and I wonder if you could or would like to share if you remember the rotary dial phone, or have memories of where that was, maybe in your house, or what it was like having a phone that you had to dial. My own kids saw a dial phone or rotary phone in an antique store, and it almost looked as if it was an alien from another planet, because they had never seen something like that before. They were born in the information age. And I see some of the comments right now. The cord was so short you could barely move, or if you had the long cord, it wrapped around everything. And as a teenager, you would close your bedroom door and the cord would like hang out. Remember that? If that happened. And the memories of one phone being in the house, and how if you did have any connection to anyone, it was the party line system. Some of us are old enough to remember the party line system of ways that people learned what was going on in their communities. So life was really, really different. And in doing digital citizenship presentations to students and to teachers and parents, this is a big deal in how we are learning how to engage and talk to our kids, because there is that different perspective. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But that's important because it means there are things that they are experiencing that we can't get our heads around. And there's a part within the documentary that really talked about that, because our lives were so focused in different ways, and it wasn't necessarily on technology. So when the information age came and this huge uptick of use and availability and immediate access to things to learn and to communicate happened, and happened very, very rapidly, we're just now getting kind of caught up to the fact that it's having an impact on our society, on our kids, on their lives, what their lives will be like when they are our age. Lots of unknowns about that right now. I did want to share a few statistics with you in studying this further. There is a article that's from NPR, and it's called A Smartphone Life. More than half of US children now have one. And this same statistic is used in the documentary Childhood 2.0, that 53% of children by the age of 11 now own a smartphone or have a smartphone, same thing. 1 in 5 children by the age of 8 have a smartphone. And that's used for many, many different things, but there's a lot of access and a lot of responsibility and things that come at kids through the use of the cell phone that many times they may not anticipate, or even we as adults don't anticipate. And they have a hard time dealing with some of those things. It could be messages from peers. It could be messages from total strangers. And we'll get to that more so in the second segment about what the technology is used for. But right now, we're going to just talk about that access, period. So here's your consideration. The first interaction in the chat with me. If you had to say who in your household, among your family members, was best at using their technology, would it be the adults in the room or in the house, or would it possibly be the kids? Now, we're talking about just the use of their technology, the familiarity with the device, and so forth. Who would you say right now, if we're honest, is probably better at using technology, the kids or the adults? Please, when you get a chance, you can put your answer in the chat. Okay, the adults, because children don't have phones yet. That's a good answer. And they may not be of that age, and we'll talk about that. It's a big number one question I get asked a lot when doing parent presentations and educator parent presentations. What age should a child have a phone? And there's different theories, different perspectives on that. Okay, Monica says, my son, and I have millennials. My children now are millennials in the 17 and 22 age range. So I would still say I yield to them for use of technology. Now, the counseling aside and some of the behavior things, I probably have a better beat on that, but they certainly are. They're better at use of technology than we are. And it says that even in Childhood 2.0, the parents there are saying, I have a resident tech expert, I hand my phone to them and I'll say, here, do this, and they can fix it, or they can do things on that phone. So thank you for interacting with us and telling us about that. And that's an awesome responsibility. It means that they're not afraid to click. They're not afraid to go search. They're not afraid to use the technology, whereas we are probably a little more hesitant. We are a little bit more fearful of the things that can happen. So that's an interesting perspective to have, because these things, and Michelle says her 4-year-old granddaughter has put pictures on the phone. So the younger and younger our students are in using the cell phone, the tablets, whether it belongs to them or belongs to someone else, they're learning very, very quickly, and they're learning online and they're learning with technology. So this is one of the parents, the gentleman in the very first photo that I pulled up said this. It was very profound. It's already too late. The train has already left the station way before I realized, and I'll never catch up. They're going to have to navigate it and make decisions for themselves without me sooner than I want. And I think therein lies the trick, or therein lies the key, is them as people navigating the use of technology and making decisions for themselves. And yes, that may happen sooner than we want, but us as adults and people who care about them, trying to have a voice, trying to have a connection, is more than likely the biggest safety factor that we can try to key in on and we can use. But we'll have to be intentional. We'll have to be very purposeful with this. And I'm saying this as a counseling background. I'm saying this as a parent, because the things that I learned as in crisis response and going to schools relative to some inappropriate use, things that are happening right now with inappropriate technology use, are very alarming. And we'll learn in this documentary about the impact of that on our youth. And what did you think about the study and the different experts who we saw some congressional hearing folks within the documentary who talked about screen addiction, social engineering, how apps and how social media is engineered to get you to be addicted to it, to keep coming back, that reinforcement with behavior. And B.F. Skinner, who is a renowned psychologist and behaviorist, many of his theories are what counseling theory and counselors in preparatory programs learn about. And he had that pigeon. I've got the little bird there because we say the race to the brainstem to try to get folks addicted to getting the attention or having the interaction. And like a pigeon keeps poking at something for that return, positive reinforcement, that's how that social media is built. It's that way on purpose. It is that way on purpose. And we have to ask, and it is. Michelle says it's like a slot machine. It certainly is. So we have to think about is this technology today perhaps having more about our behavior than it is about the device itself? Because a lot of us as parents, a lot of us as adults have become fearful of the device and maybe not seeing necessarily the impacts of the misuse of the device, the impacts of their behavior and what it does to them being separate than the actual device itself. And I know that kind of sounds a little out there to think about, but we're trying to put our fingers and our hands on the bad guy, and really the impact and the behavior part of that can come out of it could be what's more of a concern. And these are the things that come out sometimes and are the two main words, the two main conditions that the doctors, the medical doctors in Childhood 2.0 talked about, the increase in anxiety and depression. One of the medical doctors said that he's seen not only the increase in anxiety and depression, but the increase in childhood obesity, the lack of activity that happens sometimes. It's collateral damage to what is happening with the screen addiction and overuse and dependency on screens. So there are real implications, real things that are happening as like I said, I used the word collateral damage from screen addiction and misuse of the devices. So that's something we definitely want to be aware of. So here's a couple of takeaways. I want to also kind of get what you think about this as well. And Brandy shares the way to develop and manipulate things relative to devices. It's very eye-opening. And the documentary presented that, I feel like, very well and very accurately, especially in the counseling world. I'm a counselor. I have fellow counselors here on the call today. We're seeing this in schools. We're trying to help our parents and our students. I know we have parents that have joined us today with navigating this. And it's going to take a partnership. It really is going to take a partnership to be aware of what's going on with our students. So in this first segment, that's the takeaways that I saw, and I have 3 different kind of icons here to illustrate this, is the first one is definitely about perspective. How can we connect to our kids when our own childhood, our own experiences were so different than what theirs are? We as adults may not see the world the same way that they have. And some of the things they have to say are very heavy and very profound if they're already using their devices. And there's still time to interact. I'm going to help you with a few phrases at the very end of today's segment for starting that conversation if your kids already have the device, but you really want to try to connect to them to understand how things are going with that. If they haven't gotten the device yet, it's not too early to start. We'll talk about some things to help before students or children get the device. The connection piece, that's a big takeaway. In order to help them, we're going to have language that they can understand, and we're going to have to try to connect with them very personally. And one thing that I've learned in conversations with teenagers and young people who are using their devices, sometimes I'm very pleasantly surprised because how self-aware they are about what's going on around them, and how they will try to come up with ways to cope and deal with stress or anxiety or depression that comes from screen time or use. And whenever people ask me about apps and they go, oh, which apps are good, which apps are bad, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the best way to help make sure kids don't use a bad app is to get on there and be knowledgeable about it, be able to speak to it, be able to say, I'm fully aware of TikTok, and I did go explore this, and I do know about this. Doesn't mean you have to like everything, although there are some great recipes that are on TikTok. I mean, it's never as easy as saying something's all good or all bad. We'll talk about that in a second, but we do have to stay connected to our kids and try to stay aware of the trends, of things that are going down that could suck them in a way that's not healthy for them. And then the last takeaway from this segment is definitely the action step of key considerations. Our steps for helping kids have to be made, and then we have to ask the right questions. And that's tricky because if we, and you do this all the time, you're on here because you care about your kids come home from school. How was your day? Fine. What did you do today? Nothing. Those are the bad answers for the same questions that we ask every day. And yet, if we changed it a little bit, we might be able to get some different responses. So we'll talk about that here in just a minute. The pace of this growth has been so fast that some of what we'll call guardrails, this is what one of the gentlemen, the CEO of Protect Young Eyes, Chris McKenna, said earlier, the guardrails that are necessary to keep an industry accountable have been set aside in the spirit of innovation. Now that's powerful, because it means that something that we don't even fully understand the full implications of has maybe not always been ethically sound, the guardrails that we need for that. And it's been done in the spirit of innovation and that race to the brainstem and getting folks addicted to attention. And there's been some not so good things that have happened as collateral damage for that. So here's a consideration, something to put in the chat to interact with me, if you will. Could a child's mental health and behavior possibly be in response to the impact of the device? Have you seen what you feel like are changes in behavior after or during using the device for long periods of time, or when certain things happen and the device and technology might be present? What do you think about that? You can put your answers in the chat. Could mental health and behavior be in response to the impact of use of the device? Is that possible? I think a device could definitely impact mental health, Jen says. Definitely. They could lose some of their innocence and joy. That's a very interesting perspective on that, especially if they are engaged. And we will be talking about some of the things that happen online to our youth in the next segment after we do this introduction today. Thank you for sharing that. There are different studies that are being conducted. There's a growing body of research about the psychological implications. Monica says, might lose connection with real life situations. That's another great observation, a great perspective on that. We saw in the segment where reading facial expressions in real life is still really, really important. Even if you see something on a screen, seeing it in real life is different. And we are just supposed to have some social interaction that's face-to-face and in real life. So the answer to that is definitely yes. There could be some pretty big mental health concerns about inappropriate or overuse of the device. So we're really trying to strike a balance as parents, as educators, with the use of the technology that can be so wonderful, because it can, and with the in-person interactions that we know to be healthy for our young people. So what can we do with the last few moments that we have today? Because I wanted this to be a very empowered and purposeful time that we spend together. And Linda says, I will stop and say, people in general need human interaction. Online things are more of an, that's really true. There's a lot of great things that it can do. It's bringing us together right now to talk about this. But my hope is that you get that face-to-face time that's not FaceTime on a cell device or a pad or something with the folks in your house, so that one-on-one connection can be made. So thank you for that observation. It's very good. So what can we do? What are things that could be helpful, especially with right now as we may be introducing devices to our kids or to our youth, or considering how to connect with them now? Maybe they've been using devices for a year or two, and it's just now that we're realizing, maybe we should have some conversations. I've seen some things in the news, or I've heard some things that have happened that I really want to check on my kid and see if they're okay, and if they would even talk to me, because sometimes it's hard to talk to adults about what comes at them and what they're engaged in online. So let's take just a moment to kind of check that out and see some of the best practices. Now, as I said a second ago, there's two kinds of folks who are on today's call. There are the folks who have kids who are online, and the things that we would be asking are, is that device has it been given with education? Are there use parameters? Are we trying to balance and say, hey kiddo, I know you've been on this device for a while. You want to get outside and play for a little bit, or do you want to go find a friend to come over and hang out with you? Has there been deliberate conversation and education mainly about being online? So if you already have kids who are online or have a device, have a cell or smartphone, then they're already out there ahead of us. Then there are the folks who have kids who will be online. Maybe you have young children, or maybe you have kids that you're trying to navigate. Should they get the device now? And one of the things in the segment talked about that pressure for kids to have a device. One young man said, I was 11 when I felt the pressure to have that. Some folks have technology agreements. They have use parameters, and they have expectations in the home. That is up to every parent to make that decision for and with their kids, so they understand this is about safety. I always told my own kids that there's a lot of things I can negotiate. Safety is not one of them. In my house, and I know a lot of houses, that's the one thing as a parent I'm going to knee-jerk react to, is making sure my kids are safe. That's why we're here talking about this today. So if your kids will get a device at some time, what kind of education have we had before that use? What kind of ground rules? Maybe the agreement that we just talked about. And definitely still deliberate conversation and education about the use of the device and the use of the smartphone. So for a second, let's look at the things that might be helpful and things that might not be helpful whenever we're trying to navigate this with our kids and helping them be healthy and safe online. So here's one of the nots. I just won't let them have the phone. The truth is the phone itself is not the enemy. The phone is a good thing. The cell phone, the smartphone is a good thing if they know how to use it and if they know what to do when something inappropriate happens. I didn't say if, I said when, because the volume of content that comes at young people now and the purposeful approaches that can be harmful has increased very, very exponentially. So we have to get to where we beat that to the punch and say to our kids the things that they will come back to seek the help of trusted adults for. So the phone's not the bad guy, but some of the things that can happen online can be. So we want to be very honest about that. All apps are bad. I just won't let them use the XYZ app. I'll ban it. Well, that could work for a little while, but the older they get, the more savvy they're going to get. They can use things called vaults. They can put them and hide them into places if they really wanted to be a part of something. And let's face it, it ups the ante and the intrigue sometimes. What is that about? Why is that stove hot when we know they shouldn't be touching it? The apps are cool, and sometimes they can teach neat things, but we waste time trying to ban them all. They'll just go to different apps. So we want to be aware of those apps. We want to be able to navigate them safely. And the things that make us more powerful is if we're not afraid to say, okay, I heard about this app. I'm going to go check it out. I'm going to go learn about it. And then we can have an educated conversation with our kids because we knew about it. And then it's not so mysterious anymore. And then just saying technology is bad altogether. All technology is bad. That's probably not helpful. It's the same thing as saying cars are bad. And when cars first came on the scene, there weren't a whole lot of safety things going on there. There weren't even roads. So we're going to see an evolution with technology and its use. We're going to likely see more ramped up education efforts and more things that help keep students and kids safe, because we're starting to see so many things that are residual effects, the mental health deterioration, and things that are going to be worthy of addressing. And we can't say that technology is bad. If we tell our kids that, we're going to lose them. And then the worst one, I have to say this, is to say my kid would never. Now, I know that's a little hard to hear because we do spend time. Don't talk to strangers. Don't do all of these things that are outside, that are, in the world, physical world, that are harmful or could hurt you. But kids are under a lot of pressure. And if a kid falls into a situation, or the situation comes to them, or an image or a text or a post or something, it's really important that when we offer for them to talk to us, we have to ready ourselves for what we might learn and how we can encourage and support our student to help them make decisions if they are in a situation that could end up being harmful, and it's relative to technology use. We definitely want to know that most of our perception is largely based on our experiences, and we can't conceive the pressures and the possible experiences of what some kids are dealing with. And the doctor who was in our Childhood 2.0 first segment said, many parents today worry about the physical danger of their children more than the online danger because it's something we can relate to. But what we can't get our head around is when a stranger approaches them online And then it becomes a physical danger if they were to ever be around that person in real life. So it is to where this is on our forefront for safety for our kids, and making sure that they have the ability to connect with us if something is to be addressed. We just can't wrap our brain around what to be afraid of. And those dangers sometimes are very real. So let's talk about what's helpful. Things that are helpful is to study up, is to seek out parental education. Sometimes it's as quick as a 2-minute, a 5-minute, or a 7-minute video. This Childhood 2.0 is a great resource. It's already educational for you. They're exposing and sharing information that's very helpful, useful, and it makes you aware of what's out there. So seeking those opportunities out is a firsthand way to help keep kids safe. And we're going to look for healthy ways to teach our kids about it. And I'll mention at least one more right before we leave today. We have to educate kids. We have to educate kids and make that a priority in how we're going to help them grow up healthy and safe. And then we've got to talk to them. We've got to ask those right questions. We have to consider safety steps for introducing the device. Stay aware of trends and activities online that might be harmful. Don't be afraid to research them. Don't be afraid to throw something in a Google window when you hear about it or if your kid's talking about it, so you can learn more. It's very intriguing when these things are coming out, and how sometimes they're veiled in secret so that the trend can keep going. We want to start the conversation about what to do when something happens, because it's a matter of time before there's content that has to be addressed. And if we can talk about that reality first and say, if and when this happens, come talk to me about it. Let me help you. I'm going to take care of you. That's my job. And then lastly, balance is the key. Online and offline time matter. Instill the healthy disconnect when it's necessary. And more importantly, model that for them. Show them that you and I myself have to fall into this, can put the phone down and have that good one-on-one conversation with them. Here's, just in closing, relative to our very first segment, some lead-off things for engaging youth about the use of the device. Try the care and concern angle. Technology is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing, and I know it means a lot to you. I want you to know that it's a big responsibility, and if there's anything that happens online that worries you, I'm here for you. If you feel like it's a good idea to talk to someone about it, I'll make sure that happens. Being sincere and showing genuine concern, even if we don't understand everything about technology, is really a good way to go, especially if you feel your child will respond to that. I like this one. Yield to the expert. You're driving along, your kiddo's with you in the car, and here's the pitch. You know, I was watching this documentary about how being on a device all the time can cause some young people to feel anxious or maybe even depressed sometimes, or have depression. Does that really happen? You'd be surprised by opening that door to yielding to the expert, especially if you have a middle school aged or a teenage child, that you're asking them their opinion on that. And more than likely, they're going to tell you. So that's an excellent opportunity to start the conversation. And then you can make it kind of a game. This last group is for prompts. The thing that worries me most about being online all the time is, and then ask them to fill in the blank. I get really upset when I'm online and someone posts, fill in the blank. If someone sends me an inappropriate image or message, I usually, and that's kind of a lead in to see if your child may have had to deal with that, or if they know others who have. One thing I wish that would be different about how people use their devices, fill in the blank. So you're starting off a sentence and you're letting them finish it and trying to have a dialogue and a conversation about what's going on. You can find your appy place. There are parental controls. There are sometimes calming or soothing apps to help deal with anxiety and depression. And please know that what we think we know about apps is about 1/10 of what they actually know. Yes, Monica, we can definitely find a way. This is going to be a recorded session. So whenever it's posted, we'll be able to go back and you'll be able to get the questions if you like. So you can practice them and use them with your own kiddos to open up that conversation. So we'll make sure that that happens for you. And then search for some help. Digital citizenship is a great key phrase to Google. You'll find tons of ways to connect with your kids. Common Sense Media has some great information for you. There are a lot of proactive efforts now to help parents, help educators connect and help our kids grow up safe online. We definitely want to talk to folks who are in the field, especially regarding behavior in the device. call for backup if you need it. Reach out if you're working with your child's school, and talk together about ways to work out support systems for students as they're learning online. So that's what I wanted us to kind of unpack for this very first segment. The next 30 minutes that we have of the segment are coming up. There'll be a little bit more of a deep dive with the impact, the differences that happen, especially when there's very young children who are involved online. So Exploring Childhood 2.0, the second part will be Tuesday, October 20th from 6 to 6:30. We do have the web address there. It'll be a Zoom just like today. And I really do appreciate you joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad that you could join me this evening. I know everyone's schedules are really super busy, and to just take out even this short little half hour for us to be talking about this is a big deal. But what we're going to be talking about is really a big deal. My name is Jenny Yannick, and I'm a counselor specialist here at ESC Region 12 in Waco. And over the last several years, especially as a crisis responder, I've seen in going to schools, we've had over 100 different crisis calls for different reasons that we've gone to schools. But I very early on saw the impact of how students use their technology and how much they really, really relied on it. It's super important to them. They're growing up in a technology and education information age. And while I saw and still see so many amazing benefits to using technology and using social media, there really are some great connective opportunities there. There's also a big responsibility for having good education and just being able to use the technology safely. I always, when I'm talking to kids, I'll say it's not unlike throwing the keys to our car to, you know, our young person or a teenage person who's going to be using that. We want them to be educated. We want them to be safe. So social media and technology really can kind of be the same way. So I'm going to share my screen. This is the second part of a series that we are covering on what we're calling Exploring Childhood 2.0. There's a documentary. It's sponsored by the company Bark that does a lot of engagement with parents and students and tries to help them with regulation. But the facts and the research that's embedded in this documentary are really such that they cannot be ignored, and they're cross-referenced with other entities that have produced and shared information about the impact of social media and technology on our kids. So the assignment really is to be able to watch this documentary. And if you're looking at our home screen here for Exploring Childhood 2.0, that's the URL. You can always just Google it. If you haven't ever seen it before, that is fine. But you Google or put in Childhood 2.0, you can put in video or what have you. And it's about an hour and a half. So we're taking it in 30-minute increments. And last time we were together, we went over just this breaking on the scene that came about from technology and its influence, and how things have shifted generationally from how people communicated, way back when, and how they found, time to spend together, and how much that's changed in this day and age. And this second segment, and I did include a brief clip of what I'm going to be sharing with you, is really kind of taking it to the next level. And it's showing us that if not interrupted, there could be some very scary things that are set up for our kids. And that's why our involvement with education, with conversation and connection really has to happen with trusted adults first before these things actually come about. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my microphone so that hopefully you can hear the video really well. If you have any trouble, just let me know in the chat, and we're going to just explore this very quick segment.
How easy was pornography to come across?
Oh boy.
Yeah, oh boy. It was super easy.
Like, Mom, Dad, don't watch this.
I know.
I had a trunk, and I had ways to hide it, and we had different methods of finding it.
We all congregated at this one guy's house because he had a VHS tape that had something on it that had been recorded from Cinemax.
Let's go up to your uncle, go to the bathroom up there. We take a Playboy in there, put him in our thing, run down the alley and look at
She
it.
brought out a few magazines. Quick, we can look real quick. Oh, somebody's coming. Look at this? And it was a Playboy magazine. And I was like, good night. What are they doing?
And we thought, this is our moment.
You had to be MacGyver to like, you know, to get it, hold it, keep it.
But they had those sex hotlines that you could call.
Oh yeah, the 1-900.
They would like advertise it on the late night TV.
But this was, again, a plan, like a detailed plan that had to be enacted.
There was no other way to get access to this sort of thing.
In the 50s, we had pinup girls, Bridget Bardot, Marilyn Monroe, and 60s we had girly magazines, and then in the 80s we had VHS, and then there were chat rooms with webcams, and now we have cell phones in kids' hands.
All the physical barriers, be it physical location, right? Be it proximity, all those sorts of things, be it people, maybe that had access to it, right? None of those barriers exist anymore.
I mean, it's completely different now. I mean, it is like, it's all video and it's all, I mean, watching XXX videos are a lot different than looking at a Playboy magazine.
The Australian study that found that about half of children ages 8 to 16 had exposure to pornography, and many of those were actively seeking it out.
27%, if you look at the unfiltered internet, 27% of all video content on the unfiltered internet is pornographic or explicit in some way. If I imagine every day growing up, there was a coffee table in my living room, and there were 4 magazines on that coffee table. One of them was pornographic, and 3 of them weren't. And my parents just hoped every day that I didn't look at the wrong one. That is what the unfiltered internet is for kids today. We have put little boxes of porn in their pockets, under the guise of safety, under the guise of overprotection, under the guise of I have to get in touch with my kid all the time, every day, 24/7. We have given them access to pornography that far exceeds anything that we.
Okay. And I know that that is a very powerful intro to what we're going to be talking about tonight in the brief time that we're going to be together. And I will tell you that I really, over the last 5 or 6 years of doing digital citizenship presentations with students and not even getting to what you just saw, you know, handling things in benign terms. If someone sends you this and it's inappropriate, you know, just scraping the surface. I realized the necessity of having to uncover this and talk to this when at a school, a young man approached me after one of my presentations. And he said, Ms. Shonick, I want to learn how to help police and the FBI. And I thought it was a strange comment. And he said, I want to help them find the bad guys who are hackers or the bad guys that put things on the internet. I'm really good at navigating the internet. I'm good at handling technology. And while I was more of a novice, I'm a counselor, I'm more about the behavior. He was able to say a few things that let me believe that he was very knowledgeable about going in places that he knew he shouldn't. And as he talked, I could tell by his presentation and demeanor that he had been a victim of something that had happened. And at one point in the conversation, I asked him, because these are things that are not even what's called the dark web. The dark web is way, way deeper, way, way worse, way, way more visceral and reactions and more just psychologically traumatic. But I asked him, you've seen something that you wish you hadn't seen? And he hung his head and almost looked like he was breaking down. And I couldn't help but wonder if he had been exposed to something that he just could not process. So we're getting into our conversation tonight and talking about images and videos and things that our kids are exposed to through whatever means that are really more than they can handle and can have a huge psychological and behavioral implication for them that they have to carry around and hurt and worry about if we don't find a way to connect with them and get them help. What we'll explore is looking at the availability of anything online. Our concern, of course, being healthy connections and technology use and how to help minimize that exposure and what to do to help our kids if and when. And unfortunately, especially due to that last segment, you could see with the amount that's there and available, they are exposed to inappropriate content. Some solutions we might consider how we introduce technology to our kids and how we connect with them if they've already been introduced or they have their own smartphone, they have their own device right now. so we can help them achieve balance. They can understand that we are there to help them and protect them, and bad things coming to them doesn't make them a bad person. It's real hard to stop the brain in the cerebral part of that brain stem where the reptilian function is. It's hard to look away from a car accident or something that happens. It's hard to look away, and kids are very hard on themselves sometimes when they have seen things that they don't want anybody else to know because they're trying to deal with it themselves. So we're going to be exploring that. If you'll recall this segment, if you had a chance to look at it, I took a few snippets to kind of remind us in this second part of the of Childhood 2.0, the parents being very honest whenever they were asked the question about whether or not they talked to their children about sex or body parts, or if they had any interaction with them about that. It just doesn't come to mind when we hand our kids a phone. Why should we have to talk about that? Why can't we talk about how to buy a car? Why can't we talk about how to cook pasta? You know, all those things are on the internet too. But what is a thing that tends to bubble up? What's the thing that draws or has students or young people engaged? And unfortunately, sometimes hooked and addicted into addictive patterns of behavior. It's these sexualized images and sexualized videos. So I put on here this, we don't talk about those things at all, because we know that happens a lot of times. We understand why. It's not easy to talk about with your kid. And you can't fathom having to talk to a third or a fourth grader about such things when giving them that cell phone or having the smartphone in their hands. But we know over half of US kids have them now, and younger. So we're gonna have to find a way to find that middle ground for talking about something really hard. What are kids dealing with? The gentleman that was speaking earlier about to protect young eyes said to leave the ignorance behind of the if and embrace the reality of when. It is very scary. And then he also put an image, I have one here, of what things typically took place during adolescence and how hard it was to even approach that subject. It's not easy. It's not been an easy subject to broach for decades now. But the information coming at our kids is so much more explicit. It's so much more available. And it's so much more in their hands, and it's something they're not going to know what to do with if it comes to them in a way that they just don't understand. What our kids are dealing with, and it has on this chart the awareness of pornography 2015 versus 2020. That is this year. You see the light blue bar for the 22.7% of 15 to 16-year-olds. That was 2015. Now you have all the way up to 79% in the year 2020, 15 and 16-year-olds. 13 and 14-year-olds, the light bar is 16.5%. The dark bar is 66%. That's for 13 and 14. For 11 to 12-year-olds, we have 8% in 2015, and in 5 years' time, it's jumped to 51%. These are numbers we can't ignore. These are statistics we can't discount because of the images and the videos that young people are seeing at an age where they may not be able to process this. And what my interest is as a counselor and a mom and an aunt and someone who loves and supports and wants to educate our kids is, what is this doing to them? We wonder that if we leave it unchecked, what can happen over years and years of exposure. This young man, if you remember him in the clip, the second part, and he, cleaned up language for us, but I don't even think parents have to talk about the birds and the bees with kids anymore. They know about it when they are 8, if they have social media, 8. And he's probably not wrong. And then he stopped when he heard himself say that in the video and said, yeah, that's messed up. That's effed up. That's how a kid would say that. And it is. Because that's way too early for a kid to have to learn about something and not be able to navigate what appropriate relationships, appropriate intimacy might be later on in their life. And it's a hard, long road to go down to try to fix that when it's just come at them in such a difficult and unsolicited way. 25% of accessible content online is pornographic or is pornographic in nature. That's not counting the dark web. That is the part that's easily accessible. Your kid could look for it. My kid could look for it. Any kid could look for it, and it's there. Or it could be sent to them, and them have to deal with that as a hook or as a way to be more engaged in that. That's an alarming number. That's a very alarming number. So here's our consideration. And in the chat, And I want you to kind of tell me your thoughts maybe up until this point, just in what you've observed and what we've had. And we have to ask ourselves this question: can they talk about what they see online with us? You know, would we be able to set up a conversation with our kids and try to, and I hate to say it this way, try to get to them before the bad stuff does, at least to try to tell them, look, we know this is out there. We know what could come at you. We love you and we care about you, but are you okay with talking to me or to someone? What are your thoughts about, and this is a question, about how we engage our kids so they'll tell us what they see and they'll be honest with us? Take a minute and just kind of share what you think about that in our chat box. And we have a comment that's from Jen. We have to acknowledge it with our kids and invite them, ask them to share it, let them know we love them and we want to help them to stay safe. There's a lot of shame. And like I said, even in that scenario I told you about in the beginning, I very, very carefully and gently, through physically observing the physical deterioration of a young man whose solution was to try to help the good guys because he was smart enough to do it because he had been exposed to something that happened he just couldn't deal with. And we got him help. You know, I talked to his counselor afterwards. We got some help going on about that. But how many kids are like him? How many kids do we see are being in a very vulnerable state? Thank you for sharing that, Jen. We're going to have to be more brave together. And I say we because I'm a mom, I'm an aunt, I'm a teacher, I'm lots of things, but mostly wanting to help students and children. Michelle shares, I was always very open with my kids, but they didn't want to tell me things because they were afraid I would restrict their time or their phone or computer use. And there is a fine line. And I will say that sometimes the restricted use or sometimes the parameters do have to be put in place. There are tools now that can help you with that. You can actively search out parental controls if and when you feel like that's needed and appropriate. Now, the conversations are really more important because they're always going to be able to find a different device. They're always going to be able to find a friend's device or do things to get around that. If anything, kids have shown us they can get around a firewall in a school or a restricted area like nobody's business. They learn this. So it's very hard to just only restrict without talking about consequences that are harder than me taking the phone away, which is you can't get out from under this. You can't go to sleep at night because these images are in your head, or it's something that controls how you think and feel. That to me is a far worse consequence. Kids who are 10 and 12 and maybe don't believe that they will be reached out to. Those other formats, I know games and video app creations are preferred formats sometimes. Sometimes it's AI disguising or something disguising that in a safe app that a image or a video is plugged into, and that is alarming for a student, a child. So it's important, and thank you guys for communicating and texting and putting that in the chat for me. It's so much more important that they hear the voices of safety before they are approached by images, videos, people who are unsafe. Miss Patty Agatson, Dr. Agatson shares that she's been in schools where she's seen these things happen with 10 and 11-year-old students. That's extremely young. And it's also a very, and I hate to say this, but it's a preferred age for grooming behaviors from a predator and someone who may be trying to connect with extremely young and vulnerable children. That's hard to hear. It's hard to understand. It's hard to get our heads around that. But that is very much the facts and their truth. It's in all sorts of documentation and research. So it's something we have to keep on that forefront. I also share this picture of this young lady and her brother, it seems, who talked about the term nudes, which, you know, to those of us who are learning about these things, nudes are, of course, naked pictures of children, young people, anyone, but they use the term nudes. Sexting, of course, is involved in that. And she talked about that so nonchalantly. Of course it goes around. Of course this is all around school. Of course there are girls that do this. It's the way to get liked. It's the way to get popularity. It's a way to have attention, whether it's good or bad. The kids in this segment talked about how they would compromise any kind of value to have attention and to have the clout. They use the word clout a lot. Didn't care if it was good or bad. It was attention, which was again, very, very intriguing. And her response as well intrigued me. We have a lot of teachers and counselors who come in and like try to discourage us from doing that type of thing, but obviously people don't listen. Like if you have a teacher or just someone telling you constantly not to do it, it makes you want to do it that much more and try it out. And it is really hard for a kid to hear no and stop that and don't do that. We're going to have to go further than that. We're going to have to say why. We're going to have to tell them the things that can happen if they are caught in a vulnerable position, or if something happens where they just can't think because their mind, their feelings are overwhelmed by something coming at them like this, and hopefully connect to them so that they can be safe. What most kids are looking for, especially on social media, is what? Attention. Like I just said a moment ago, it blew my mind that these kids were able to say, even if they say bad things about me, I can have 6,000 likes and people are still going to friend me because I could be a real jerk in real life, but I'm getting attention. And that is, to me, a real divide for the conscience in trying to make healthy decisions and safe decisions growing up, and just trying to be a good person, is that the impact can be so detrimental. I will stop and say this. This is a plug kind of for something that's online. If you have Netflix or you're watching Netflix, there is and I'm going to put the word out here. It's called The Social Dilemma. And if you get a chance, dilemma, Google that, learn more about that, because it talks about social engineering and how social media is made to be addictive. We saw some of that with B.F. Skinner in the very first segment. It just blows your mind. And it's hard enough as an adult to deal with that, but a kid dealing with it is really, really overwhelming. It sets a pattern of behavior that can last a very, very long time. They mentioned the NMK syndrome, the not my kid syndrome. When they said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We all have to say and know that throughout the longevity of time that our kids are online, they're going to encounter something very highly likely when they encounter that it's going to be overwhelming to them. So please keep that in mind, especially as you're talking to colleagues and fellow, parents and people who are struggling with this too. We don't want it to happen. We don't want it to happen. But our stance is going to have to become, what do we do when it happens? How can we help our kids when it happens? So the takeaways from 2.0 on the part 2 is, number 1, communication. Pure and simple. It's communication. At the heart of what we were dealing with is the importance of safe connection and connection through healthy communication. We really want them to listen to the voices of people that truly care about them and love them and are there to help them, so that they don't succumb to things that are not looking out, and people who are not looking out for their best interests. They need to be protected by people who love them. The next thing to look at is access. I have the pin right there for access, meaning who do our kids have access to and who has access to them? Do they know how to say no if someone wants to follow them and they don't want to add them because they don't have a familiarity with them, or they don't, or someone starts to act in a way that makes them feel weird and they can block them. They don't feel the strength sometimes to know that they can do these things. You can block someone. You can go get help from a trusted adult, from someone who loves you. So access is a really big deal. And then finally, response. We have to think about doing nothing being not even an option anymore. What steps do we take for cyber safety with our kids? And how are we walking with them through this journey? They're watching us and our habits as well. The things that we're doing to set that method with them, that tone for having a balanced, safe, interactive experience online. So cyber safety has to be with us, working not against our kids, but really working with them as they're online. So here's another consideration for some chat activity. And this one, I don't want you to have to answer yes or no to, because I know it's really hard. But what are your thoughts, about how do we talk to you? Because I'm going to give you some phrases, just like I did last time, to maybe lead off into that direction. But we have to think about, can we talk to our kids about the bad stuff that's out there as a reality before, or hopefully minimizing, lessening the bad stuff when it hits them? What are your thoughts about talking to our kids about not sending nudes, not sending bad pictures, what to do if one comes to you? I'll give you just a minute to put that in the chat. And as those are coming in, and Jennifer, thank you. She says, the first webinar did talk to her too, that if they receive those nudes or receive those things, what to do, give them the steps and the actions so they can feel good about trying to have a conversation. And it doesn't always mean that we know it's going to be easy for them to do. And what a lot of young people don't realize, yes, and I have someone who's saying, I'll talk to them now, boys are 8 and 12 and never thought about this, and 12-year-old has a phone. And here's the thing, that when I'm talking to high schools and I tell them about what the images and the videos on their phones, especially if they're transferred and sent to one another, is that the possession of it's a misdemeanor and the transmission's a felony. They don't think of those images as being child pornography because, number one, half the time they're kids themselves, and number two, it's usually maybe of someone that they know, so they don't see that it's falling into that same range of acquiring it and then transmitting it, and what kind of trouble they can get into. And a young girl, even if she or a person, it can be a male or female, if they have an image that's inappropriate used, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children can help them walk through ways to try to protect themselves. So, and young people who need to know they don't have to send those nudes. There were some amazing scenes in Childhood 2.0 in this second piece where this group of girls were talking about, well, guys will dump you if you don't send them. There's a big dilemma for these young people to go through. Do I send it and try to be cool, or do I not send it? I'm going to get made fun of either way. It's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on these kids. And Jen's saying, I asked them what they thought so that they could get to talking about that. And that's why I love different approaches. We're going to see more things on care and concern, or make them the expert, or ask them the questions. As long as they're talking to us and they know we care and they know there's bad stuff out there, the hope is that we minimize what happens to them internally in their minds and their hearts when this stuff comes at them and they think they've got to hold on to this big secret, because they would never want you and I to know that they were exposed to this and then what to do with it. And Michelle says it's a parent's job to keep our kids safe. It really is. And at the end of the day, we'll have to champion these things and together, so we can help keep kids safe. And adults don't realize how easy the internet can creep to find our kids and befriend them, and the grooming process. We're going to see some really heavy stuff in the next segment that we need to probably address. But we need to find out what we can do. And that's what we're going to wrap up with today. And we know this is all about the race for attention. It really is. And if you ever get to see that Social Dilemma documentary, it's another one that's really, really good and explores the impact of social media and technology. So let's talk about what's helpful and what's not. Here's probably what's not. And we kind of alluded to this in the last piece. Giving them a phone and then doing nothing. It's the same thing as tossing the keys to your car to your kid. It really is. And if that kiddo is 8 years old or 14, or whenever, most kids are going to get it way earlier than that. It's no different than giving them the keys and going, hey, if you can get to the wheel and you can push the pedal, go for it, kiddo. You know, there's a small chance they could do it right and not be hurt, but they're still not following the law and they don't know how to use it. So doing nothing is not an option. Even if we don't know the day or time, we know something can happen. We've got to address it first. They're going to find out some way. Someone else can just tell them. That's not a good idea either. It's really rolling the dice about the kind of experiences they can be going into, and how they would distance themselves and withdraw from us as loving people who care about them if this all starts going down. And that's why we ask, who's really looking out for our kids' best interests? We really need to be the voice they're willing to listen to. Making them feel like they are bad people if they have a mistake, if they make a mistake. We have to know our kids' personalities very well. And a lot of kids, they're just little people. They're people who aren't adults yet. And they have opinions and they have insights. And sometimes it's very intriguing to hear them talk about their lives and the things that are coming at them, because it's so different than what we experienced. So making them feel like they're the bad guys is really not going to be helpful, as long as we can talk about their responsibility and the consequences that can happen if they don't either stop or get help, so that they can be safe. And for a lot of kids, it can ruin their entire future. They can have things tagged to them that anytime there's a search, that name is going to bring up that image. It's going to bring up something that they don't want to be associated with. And they don't even know this. So that's a very big and important piece to talk about for what not to do. What we do want to do, what is helpful, is to study up. We seek out parental education, healthy ways to use the device and how to teach our kids about it. We want to make sure that we are educating the kids. We can use safe apps for helping them learn about things and then talk to them about them. We need to consider safety steps for introducing the device. Stay aware of trends and activities. Being here today is another great investment in that. Start the conversation about what to do when something happens, something that's alarming that they're going to see. And then balance is the key. Online and offline times, and I did keep this slide from last time, it still very much applies. Instill the healthy disconnect when necessary. It's good for them to be able to have a balanced life and have balanced ways of dealing with what they see online. So now let's have some conversation starters. Here's some lead-offs for you. Conversations, care, and concern. I've been learning about cyber safety and how there's some inappropriate images and video that go around on kids' devices. I want you to know that I love you and I care about you, and that you don't have to send images of yourself if you don't want to. Those can end up anywhere online, so don't do that to yourself. Also, if someone sends you an image and it makes you uncomfortable, let me know and we'll figure out the best way to handle it. That's the care and concern perspective. Next, we have the yield to the expert. This is kind of doing a little play on this for them, just like we did in the last segment. I learned today that about a quarter of what is online has to do with inappropriate images and videos. And if they're older and you want to say so, pornographic or nudes, whatever you think they can kind of digest on that. Does that really happen? And then you let them explain to you what they know about this. And they'll do it as it's something out there, maybe, that's never even bothered to come near them. But you might follow up with more questions about their experience, or if this have they know of anything that has happened to someone or affected anyone that they know. And you get closer and closer to whether or not they've actually had to deal with that. The big thing on this is that if they tell you they have, you can't get the pants shocked off of you and freak them out. You got to listen, and then you have to walk through that together on how to get help for that, and make sure that they are talking to you. If they're brave enough to tell you they're dealing with it, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So you can also make it a game. Here are some prompts. If someone sends you an inappropriate image or video, you would, and let them fill in the blank. If someone asks you to send an inappropriate video or image of yourself, you would, and make them answer that. Because believe it or not, most kids, those words are going to come back to them in their little heads, especially when they finish the sentence and they're the ones that say that. You don't know when that might be the one time that they are able to stop something bad from happening. There's a conscious battle that's going on, unconscious battle, when they're presented with these kinds of things in most cases. The thing that makes inappropriate images and videos of you online a bad idea is, and then have them answer that question as well and finish up the sentence for you. Those are prompts. Prompts are great ways to lead off and let them finish up. And then you can ask questions if there's something that they say that intrigues you. Finally, we want to make sure you can still find your appy place. There are parental controls. You can use those or shop around if you need to. You want to keep the communication open. You want to observe behaviors from your child and seek help if you feel like your child needs it. If there are extremes in behavior with their devices, there's a whole list of things that you can find on some of the stronger websites. One of them that I'd like to leave us with is Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media, you can go to this and you go to Parents Need to Know, and there's a lot of great resources for you there. You can learn about ways to talk to your child, ways to help with digital citizenship. There's just great helpful things that are online. So the technology and social media can really work for you when we know where to look. So I'm wrapping up today with our second segment. Next week, we're going to finish up with the last 30 minutes of, and the last part of Childhood 2.0. It's going to be very hard to watch that piece if you haven't seen it already, because the experiment that is done involving a fictitious couple of children and the responses from predatory advances are very alarming. I will kind of give you the disclaimer, but it's worth watching, and we will finalize our series on that note. Thank you for joining me today. I'll look forward to seeing you again soon, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.